So I've been playing a ton of Balatro, and I think it's time to get into making a tier list for the tarot cards. Now, any good tier list has some sort of rubric or metric that it goes by, because it's impossible to evaluate these things in all situations all the time. So here's what we're going to be doing for today. We're going to be looking at all the tarot cards, and we're going to average their efficacy across all decks and all difficulties. And we're also going to be talking in terms of how far they can go in endless mode. So we don't care about things that just help you get past ante 8 to barely beat it. And then obviously some of these are going to be more effective or less effective in certain decks or at certain difficulties. And I'll talk a little bit about that as we go about the rankings. But this is just kind of an average baseline to start by, and then in those different areas that you're going to be playing, hopefully this acts as sort of a guideline to help you out. So I think the easiest place to start is going to be with some of these guys. So we've got the world, and the moon, the star, and sun here. I suppose at this point I would actually go ahead and rank them like this. You know, have your spades slightly higher than hearts, slightly higher than clubs, slightly higher than diamonds, but really these four are about the same across the board. So each one of these is going to convert upwards of 3 cards to the desired suit. Why is that good? Well, it's usually going to help with some sort of flush strategy. Now, that can be a regular flush, a straight flush. That could get up to the flush 5, flush house. So it can be effective with some of those later game builds, right? If you're pushing really far in endless, a lot of times it's going to be, something like a flush 5 that you're shooting for. And it's really helpful early on. If you don't have a strategy to go for right off the bat, a lot of times this is a good starting place. You see one of them offered. Okay, you just pick 3 things at random. Now we're going to lean towards spades for this run. And then just based on the jokers, I think I would have them kind of in this order. Spades being probably a little bit better than hearts, which are a little bit better than the other two. But there's a lot of flexibility in there as well. One of the most effective ways to actually use any of these cards, though, is in the consumable slots, okay? So by having it in the consumable slots, and this is going to apply to a lot of these tarot cards, you can use them in really sticky situations. So if you're going spades, you might want to actually hold on to a world card for a case where you don't draw enough spades. You're going to need to hit that flush, maybe after all your discards are gone. You slam it down, you're guaranteed that you actually get the flush on that turn, and then going forward, you've got more spades in your deck. Great. But even, let's say you're going spades, you've got this star here. Should you just sell it? Well, maybe not. Maybe you hold on to it, and later on you end up turning clubs or hearts into diamonds. It's not really a big gain or a loss, but it can really bail you out on a single turn. So they end up being pretty decent cards, but they're not really enough to push into very late into those modes. And a lot of times you're only going to end up using 1 or 2 of these things, pushing you in a single direction anyway. Okay, so with that, let's go on to I like Hierophant here at B. Hierophant and Empress, I really don't know which one of these ends up being better. I'd put them right side by side, so you're going to end up getting plus 30 chips on 2 cards of your choice. Empress is going to be a plus 4 multiplier on 2 cards of your choice. So why is this good? Well, it's always nice to have a benefit on some kinds of cards. If you're going far, again, looking for 5 of a kind, flush 5, something like that. This isn't going to put you at the maximum potential of what you can do. You know, there's better effects to have on cards, but it's a pretty sizable effect. And the fact that it ends up hitting 2 cards is a lot better than what you'll see from most of these cards. Most things here, that are going to produce a pretty strong effect, it's only going to be on one, and you're going to look to have to duplicate that in all kinds of different ways. Having this on 2 adds a lot of consistency into your deck. So I do think at higher difficulties, these end up being a lot better. You have fewer discards, you have fewer cards in hand if you go all the way up to the gold stake. So being locked into those kinds of constraints, it's really nice to just have the consistency for a 4 or 5 card hand. At least 2 of them are going to be pretty good. They're also extremely useful in the consumable slot, especially if you're up against like the needle, right? You gotta play a single hand to pass the blind. You just play it on 2 of the cards that you want, and they're also very good long term. So I think pretty solid choices for just about any deck, just about any time, until maybe the very, very end of an endless run. It'll be pretty tough to find some targets there. Yeah, let's go looking for some more. So I think Lovers. I'm a little between C and D here. I think I'm going to drop it down into D. A lot of times with these cards, you're going to be going for a certain suit, and being able to hit up to 3 of them is pretty good, pretty effective. A wild card, it's usually going to be used for 1 card going into that 1 suit that you're going for. It's not so much that like, oh, it's great, it could be a club or a diamond or a heart in all these different situations. It's very hard to make a deck that's going to be balanced across all the different suits. There are some jokers that'll actually play into that, but I wouldn't say it's a very consistent build, something you should really look for. A lot of times I think Lovers ends up just being good as an enhanced card, so it can either be eaten up by the Vampire or work towards something like the Driver's License that's counting for the number of enhanced cards in your deck. Overall, the effectiveness kind of so-so. Along with that, I'm going to go Magician. The same sort of thing. I don't know what order you would really have these in. Maybe I'd give the slight edge to Magician, just because you can play this multiple times. Sometimes you can trigger a card multiple times to be played, and then it's going to increase the chances of the multiplier effect it's going to put on, or the very rare chance of getting $20. Generally speaking, though, I think this just isn't what you want to put on your cards that are going to go very, very long term. So you might end up replacing the effect from Magician, right? The lucky card effect. Or you might just want to slap it on some kind of middle of the road cards. Maybe you don't put this on an ace, you just put it on like a 10 of the suit that you like. So if you come across it, you can play it, or yeah, again, if you got something to trigger it multiple times, it can work, but definitely wouldn't say it's the most effective. Chariot, I'm going to drop up here in A. I could see it as like a high B, low A kind of situation. So this is going to turn a card into a steal card. Steal card, if it's in your hand while everything's being played, is going to add that extra 1.5 times multi, kind of like a polychrome effect. Now, lower difficulties, I think it's great. You can build up a large hand size a lot of times. The effect itself, because it's multiplicative, can be super, super effective. And if you can copy these cards, you can get lots of steal cards, get this effect again and again and again. Get amazing scores. But as you get into the harder difficulties where your hand size is reduced, your number of discards is reduced, a lot of times you don't have the luxury of, say, holding on to a steal card but throwing back a couple other cards. If this is on a 6 of hearts but you're going that spade strategy, you're looking for spades, you might still have to chuck it back. So what you end up doing is actually putting it onto a spade, and there's a good chance that you play it in your flush, your full house, your flush house, whatever it is, just because, well, you have to, you're forced to. So, yeah, it can be used to be very effective in some of those late game builds. Overall, I still think it's a good card across all difficulties. Much, much better at lower difficulties. I'd maybe even get it up into S there at lower difficulties. But it's hard to say that it's all the way up there as you get higher and higher. Also worth noting that there's a joker that works with the number of steel cards in your deck. Those multiplicative effects, like I said, very, very effective. And so not only are you getting it from the steel card, but you're also getting it from the Joker. Very strong combination. Builds that go that way can be very, very good. Okay, Death. Death I have to drop into the ST tier here. I think Death, well, we'll get to it. One of the strongest tarot cards here. So Death is going to be able to copy an existing card into another existing card. So if it comes out of a pack, you know, you've only got a selection of cards to deal with. Hopefully you've built a deck that is pretty consistent at that point. You're going to be able to nail one of the cards that you'd like to duplicate in there. It could be by suit, it could be something with an effect like steel, like glass, like something that's been buffed by one of these. But the real big advantage of Death over something like Chariot or some of these other cards, not only does it give you a great card, you know, let's say I've got an enhanced ace, it doesn't just give me a 5th ace, but it actually removes a bad card from my deck. So I can get rid of a club to now get a heart. That's gonna help my, you know, flush 5 strategy, and I've got an ace. It's absolutely fantastic. Yeah, you're going to be targeting different things in different situations, but across all difficulties, absolutely amazing, and so strong in the consumable slot. Something like Chariot, yeah, it's good in the consumable slot. You can put it down if you need that extra multiplier right at the end of the round, but Death is going to help you more long-term. You can fish for those cards that you really need to make your build super effective. So, highly recommend going for Death. Across all difficulties, pretty much all situations, decks, everything like that. What have we got here? The Devil. Devil's a tough one, again, between that C and D. I think I'm going to go ahead and put it in D, maybe about there. Gold is okay. So this is going to turn a card gold. If it's in your hand at the end of a round, you get $3. It's nice early where you're trying to build interest, you know, you're really trying to get up to that 25 gold threshold. There's some times where it can be synergistic with other jokers that you've got. But overall, gold doesn't tend to really be what, you know, wins runs and pushes them into crazy depths of endless. Gold in the later game, you see a lot of people that they'll bank up, you know, 50, 75, 100 gold, and they're just smashing rerolls again and again. Not to mention, it's something that also competes with the other enhancements. So if you've got a card that's gold, it can't also produce better effects to score more. So it's an okay card early. I do think it can be effective in some early stacking, and there's a couple situations where it's very nice to have a gold card. Certainly not useless by any means, but yeah, not something that I generally recommend targeting out of a tarot pack. Emperor. We're going to be putting Emperor in B. Now, yeah, where in B exactly would it be? We'll put it here. I think it's kind of reasonable. So it's going to produce 2 random tarot cards for you. Now that's generally going to be pretty good. You're going to see this distribution is going to be about similar by the end of things, I think. Most tarot cards are pretty good, and there's some situation where they can be valuable. Great example, like I talked about before, is like you're going for spades, but you have that star card. Well, you get a desperation flush if you really need it by turning, you know, hearts into diamonds. You can later convert them to spades, no problem, it's fine. But the big advantage of Emperor is that it puts both those cards into your consumable slots. And most of these cards are going to be much more effective in the consumable slot location because you get more reign over when to actually use the card. Like I talked about there, you can fish for, you know, 2 kings for strength. It's way easier when you've got discards, you've got time to set it up, you can wait between rounds. Whereas if you open that same strength card up out of a pack, well, what are the chances you hit kings to be able to turn them into aces, right? The other thing with the Emperor, if you end up just whiffing completely, you can still sell the card, so you do get a little bit back from it, right? On top of that, there's some jokers that benefit from using tarot cards, so you can actually build up, your multipliers even higher by now, using the Emperor plus 2 more tarot cards. There's the obvious case now. What deck is this bad in? Well, there's a deck that only allows you to have 1 consumable slot. It gets pretty useless in that case, but in pretty much every other case, just very solid, consistent. Gonna want to be using it a lot of the time. What do we got here? The Fool. Okay, the Fool. It gets to copy any previously played tarot card. The last, I should say, played tarot card. It is even better than Death. And you might be like, that's a little weird. If it's going to just copy the best card, the next best card, which I do think is Death, why would it actually be better? Well, it's that exact same reason. It's going to copy it and put it into your consumable slot. So even if you get the Fool out of a pack, now you're putting Death into your consumable slot. You can choose when to use it. That part alone makes it great, even if you were just targeting a single card. But you're generally not going to be targeting a single card. You don't have that luxury, especially at higher difficulties. Although you're going to be opening a lot of packs most of the time. So it's not too tough to target something specific. But for Death to be effective, a lot of times you're going to need to put some enhancements on cards to begin with. And the Fool just lets you be flexible with things. If you're desperate and in need, you can play something, or you just happen to turn up the right thing. Is Strength going to be the greatest card? That example again. Well, it's a lot better if I can now use it twice and I can turn all of my kings into aces. 8 aces is a lot better than 6 aces. So many applications for the Fool. I think it easily takes the cake as the best tarot card in all of Balatro. Next one being the Hanged Man. Hanged Man, very, very good. I want to say it's somewhere here in B as well. Probably above Emperor. Maybe above these as well. Boy, it gets real tough when you're trying to think across all different decks and difficulties and everything. But if you've played any sort of deck builder, you're going to be familiar with the concept of thinning your deck. If you remove bad cards from your deck, you have a higher probability of hitting good cards. And that's exactly what this lets you do. It lets you delete 2 cards, so you can get rid of 2s and 3s and 4s. They can be bad suits, bad values, whatever it is, and it's going to increase your odds of getting your 4 of a kind, 5 of a kind, your flushes, anything that you are really targeting for your build. So it's very, very effective in quite literally all decks, all difficulties. It's just that, is that the singular thing that's going to get you to the highest scores and the furthest in endless mode? Well, no, you're going to need some help from other enhancements, but it is going to be necessary in a lot of cases. Unless you're just creating tons and tons of copies of your really good cards, you really, really want to thin your deck. Very, very effective card. Hermit. Hermit's a weird one. Hermit, I want to put as like a high C. Hermit, as I mentioned before, money isn't that hard to come by in Balatro, even at a lot of the higher difficulties. You get up to that 25, you're building interest. By the end of the run, you're smashing rerolls with tons of money almost all the time, even when packs are getting crazy, crazy expensive. So a lot of times this is going to give you $20 or something close. Even if it doesn't, even if you're looking at 10, you can just buy it from the shop, get some free money, why not? And that'll help with your interest or buying cards or vouchers or whatever it is. But money just doesn't have that much reach, so it's better in the early to mid game. It's a pretty consistent card. There's nothing wrong with it. The more rerolls you get, the more chances you get, well, at any of these tarot cards or at good jokers. It's totally fine, totally reasonable. Overall, pretty good. Doesn't really have increased efficacy that I can think of in the consumable slot. It's going to boost things that scale off of how much money you've got, but you pretty much want to use that right away anyway. So just an all right, pretty solid card. High Priestess. This is another kind of weird one. I'm gonna say this is about a low C. So it is helpful to have planet cards to be able to actually boost the hands that you like playing a lot. It's really, really great if you can get the telescope. If you get the telescope, you're going to want to smash those celestial packs, right? Try to keep bumping up your most played hand. Sometimes there's cards that scale with your most played hand, something like Supernova, right? Very, very effective to actually be able to build that up. But High Priestess, just giving you 2 random planets, a lot of times you just have one that you're really, really searching for. And that one that you're really searching for might not come out of it. If it does, great. It ends up actually being very, very valuable at the time that you play it. But the good thing here is if you miss, you can just sell both the planets. The other thing that makes it somewhat decent, I think, is the fact that it scales with some other jokers as well, right? The building of those planets, it's necessary for the very, very long runs into Endless. You gotta make it work somehow, and it can also be useful early when you don't really know what direction you're going. Maybe it just hits like a 2-pair or a pair, which kind of helps you survive for another round. But ultimately, yeah, for the best of the best runs, that is still a component of things. You do still need your overall hand level to increase. This is one way to do it. It's going to have more longevity than any of these, but it's really not a consistent way to do it, so I don't love the card. Judgment. Now, Judgment, I think, is probably the worst tarot card in the entire game. It's going to produce a random joker. Now, why is that not a very good effect? Well, for one, you really want to hand pick the jokers that you're going to get. So if you see them in the shop, you see them in a pack, I would say about half of them are going to be useful for any sort of direction you're going, depending on where you're at in the game. So early in the game, a lot of stuff might give you money, or it might be able to stack, but it's not really in the direction you were hoping to go. Maybe it's like an effect where your diamond cards produce a larger multiplier, but yeah, you were going that spade strategy. It's not useless, it's fine, it'll help you, go another round or two, so you might snag it from the shop just to keep things going. But you want to be mindful about the selections. So about half the time this card's going to totally whiff. In the later game, you've already got your build going. So you don't even have a slot for Judgment. Not real effective there. And then just a random, 1 out of 100 and some odd chances of hitting the thing that you want. Probably unlikely to happen as well. So really, I think the most effective time to use Judgment, almost the only time that you would use it, is in the case that you're early, you've checked the shops, they don't have the jokers you want. Maybe you open a pack, you still didn't get a joker that's going to help you. Maybe it's giving you money, but you need a multiplier to get to the next round. You bust open a tarot card, hoping for something that's going to help keep you alive. Judgment's there. Okay, we'll take it. We'll see if the run continues. The only other case I can really think is in the boss blind that's going to force you to sell a joker just so everything isn't debuffed. You could have this in your consumable slot. Conceivably, if you see it in the shop, pick it up. Then that random chance that it ends up being effective in the very last boss blind of the run, at least all the way up to Ante 8, that's somewhat effective, I suppose. But yeah, I would stay away from it. It's probably more useful as a single dollar card sold a lot of the time. Justice, extremely good, extremely good. So this is going to produce a gold card. Rather, it's going to turn a card into I called it gold, a glass card. It's going to turn a card into a glass card, giving it a 1 in 4 chance of breaking when it scores, but also having a ×2 multiplier. So it's really necessary in pushing to the furthest reaches of Endless, okay? That's what makes it so good. You need it to be able to push the bounds of Endless, get those very, very high scores. Yeah, it might end up breaking, so you're hoping to save it to the end of the run, but that ×2 multiplier, pretty hard to beat, right? It's going to be better than the 1.5 that you get from Chariot if you can hold on to something in your hand, although it does have to be on a played card, whereas this can be in your hand. The issue with Justice comes from the higher difficulties. So at lower difficulties, it's easily S tier. easily S tier. You could even argue that it's like better than death, but a lot of times you're just going to be using death on your glass cards anyway. But when you're at those higher difficulties, you've got fewer cards in hand and fewer discards. How many times have I said that? You don't often have the luxury of waiting on playing your glass cards. If you've got 6 cards in hand, 7 cards in hand, you can only throw back, 1 or 2, something like that. And if one of those is a glass card and you have to play it for a flush or a full house, you might be playing it when you didn't actually need to. It's going to break early, it ends up being useless, and it doesn't actually help you push further. So it's still a good card. Obviously, it's going to push those scores up at the highest end, and it will help you out if you do need it at some point. It's another one that's so effective to just keep in the consumable slot for as long as you possibly can. If you can spare it, you're not getting an Emperor or something like that. At the higher difficulties, I actually recommend just sit on it for as long as you possibly can until there's a hand where you absolutely need a glass card, and then you can play it, and then hopefully you can start duplicating and things like that later. But again, you want to play it earlier so you can duplicate it, but if it ends up breaking because you're forced to play it, it's just not quite there as effective as these guys. Strength is a good card. Is it a high C? Is it a low B? I'm going to go ahead and put it about here. It's a weird one. It's very useful in some cases, and it's not so useful in others. Generally speaking, if you're going for a 4 of a kind, 5 of a kind of strategy, full house, something where you need lots of copies of a single rank of cards, it's very good at doing that. But it is so much better at doing that when it's in the consumable slot than it is when you open it in a pack. Because to open it in a pack, you just got a handful of cards to look at. You might not even have 2 that are at the same rank. You might be dropping it on like a jack and an 8. And okay, well now you've got an extra queen and a 9. It's going to make your full houses a little more likely to come. That's great, but how good is that long term? It's a little so-so. But if you can sit on it in your consumable slot, yeah, just wait until you get 2 queens to turn them into kings, and that synergizes with your jokers, or 2 kings into aces, and you've got the highest scoring card now at 6 copies. Very good. Also can be used to manipulate things like straights. A lot of value when it works. But a lot of times it's just not quite there if you're taking it out of a pack. So I just kind of want to put it in the bunch. It's sort of in the bunch. If you get it out of an Emperor, or you can use the Fool on it, really great a lot of times. But in other cases, you might want to avoid it. Temperance. So Temperance, I think, is below Hermit for sure. I'm probably going to bump it all the way down to D tier. So it's going to produce money based on the sell value of all your jokers. That tends to be less than what the Hermit is going to produce. A lot of times, even very good jokers altogether are going to sell for something like $10 to $12. That's okay. Again, we've talked about money. How good is it? It's okay. I'd actually probably... I might even put it all the way down here in D. It can help. It can be okay. It's fine. Early game, it's also not going to be as good as Hermit. It's usually easier to build up your money before you fill out with tons of jokers, and then if they've got other effects on them, like polychrome and stuff, that's all going to come later a lot of the time. So just a less effective way of making money most of the time. And yeah, money is not typically what's going to just win it for you deep into Endless. The Tower. It's like right here with the High Priestess. These two, I think they're teetering on the edge, low C, high D. I would say it's a little bit better than the Priestess. It's going to turn one of your cards into a stone card. So it kind of has that effect of getting rid of something that's really low scoring. But it turns it into this card that's going to give you 50 chips. It's got no suit, so it can't be used in flushes, but it's always counted in scoring. That's the big thing with it. So what's great about it is you can actually run a deck that plays like high card, pair, 2-pair. Just rank those up. Say you've got the telescope, you can just run those numbers up. If you can generate a ton of stone cards, you can also play these in some of those hands. You can score a lot of points on the worst hands possible. The problem is this just doesn't scale into endless very well. It does a pretty good job of helping you get to that ante-8 win, right? Just get past ante-8. You can actually do it off of, literally just high cards and a whole bunch of stone cards, especially if you got the Joker that's generating those stone cards along with the Tower. But the Tower's only going to hit one of those cards. Doesn't have a ton of longevity. Can't recommend it in the best of the best decks, especially things that are going to be looking for 5 cards to score, like flushes, the flush house, the flush 5, things like that. And finally, the wheel. I'm going to drop this here while I cough. My voice is totally going, but we've got the Wheel of Fortune. Where do we actually put it? Is this a C? Is this a B? I'm going to go ahead and put it high C. Now, why am I going to put it there? Well, long term, in Endless, this does have a really nice benefit. Once you've got, your glass cards, your steel cards, you're copying things with Death, the Fool, you've used the Hierophant, the Empress, all this stuff to build the perfect deck, right? You somehow got seals on all your cards and then copied them. Life is good. How do you improve? How do you get better? Well, this on one of your best Jokers is going to be great. So it's a 1 in 4 chance of giving foil, holographic, or polychrome to one of your Jokers. It says 1 in 4. It feels like 1 in 10. Like it never hits, I swear. But when it does hit, if you get something like polychrome on one of your better Jokers, like a blueprint, right? Something that's going to copy another Joker. You get it on, the family, that's going to give you a huge multiplier on, I believe, 4 of a kind. On a driver's license, on your vampire, things like that are just irreplaceable, right? They're irreplaceable Jokers that you have. Now you've made it better. Of course, polychrome in almost every situation is going to be the best for longevity, I think. But even just adding that holographic, adding the foil for extra chips, another 10 multiplier, another 50 chips, it's a substantial effect. It'll actually push things further. So it's very, very good in the late game to start targeting these. Every time you see them in the shop, go ahead and buy them. It's debatable out of packs. A lot of times these things are still going to win out, but it does get better, the further you go into the game. The other case where I like it is very, very early. Let's say you're playing on a harder difficulty, you're pushing for that gold stake, and maybe you find one great Joker. Sometimes it's a Joker that doesn't have a benefit, but it's gonna scale. For every card added to your deck, it's gonna get better. Or the vampire. For every enhanced card you play, it's gonna steal that enhancement. But it's not good right from the get-go. You can try just slamming Wheel of Fortune on it, see if it sticks, and it's gonna give you a little bit more wiggle room in the early parts of the game. Hopefully keep you alive. It's a big risk, the 1 in 4 that's truly a 1 in 10. But when it works out, it's great, and you kind of need some luck a lot of times in those higher stakes. So why not take the chance early? In the middle game, you have some Jokers that you're maybe going to be swapping out that you don't love. Maybe you've got something like DNA that's really good. It's helping build your deck. You're just duplicating a card every turn. Well, that's great, but you're planning on selling it by ante 9, ante 10, something like that. So if Wheel of Fortune sticks on that, it's the 1 in 4, and then maybe you lose like a 1 in 5 because it targets the wrong Joker. Also not the best. And those are times where just all these other cards are more effective. So a lot about all the tarot cards here in Balatro. Apologies for all the coughing. But hopefully this serves as a bit of a baseline when you're looking to pick a tarot card out of a pack. You're not really sure what to go for. Think back to this, but be smart about things, right? Different difficulties, different decks, different situations are going to call for different cards. This is by no means an end-all, be-all. This is always how things are ranked. And just like with every tier list, I'm sure tons of people are going to disagree, have other opinions, and, well, I'm excited to see them. I'd actually like to hear what other people think, because I do think there's quite a bit of wiggle room and room to debate for a lot of these things. So hope that helps next time that you're choosing some tarot cards.